All right, so this is part two. I'm combining these videos. I hope it goes through okay. I don't have a pause button, so I will be just kind of going back into flow. My husband came home, and obviously my dog was excited, and so I'm going to come back into the flow a little bit, talking about essentially our past and timelines that are pulling us into things that we no longer wish to be necessarily have in our lives, and I did a video on that, but this is a little bit more in flow, and I was seeing people, so for example, this is a collective experience. So there's the collective, many people are in the middle of this river, and they're looking back on their past, and they're looking on their future, and they can see the embankment, and they're worried about how to jump to get to the other side. When they look behind them, sometimes they're thinking about, well, should I go back also? So not just judgments, but should I jump back over to the other side? Maybe it was safer. Maybe there's a shorter distance between their past timeline and this now moment. It's too far of a jump to the future one. And so there's a lot of people that are experiencing this right now in the collective. And so in this viewpoint, you are able to view your past, if you do it from a non-judgment perspective, as a guiding, a foundation for you, or a platform that enabled you to jump off of to be where you are now. So recognizing, and I used an example in my last video about somebody who has a group of friends, they no longer connect with them, but they decide to go out with them again because they haven't seen them in a while. And it could be that they, in that moment, see this dynamic. It could be great. They decide that they really enjoy those friends and they can still be with them and still be in their future happy timeline from time to time. That's an option too. The other version is that they watch their friends behaving and just not connecting with them on a non-judgment space, but just realizing that they don't want to have 4 or 5 drinks. They don't want to necessarily, and I'm talking, it's a reference to a behavior, a habit, a pattern. Because what happens, it's not like, this is kind of based around a habit of going bar hopping all the time, or a habit of getting into a conversation that's gossipy. So I'm going into different, it's not just about alcohol and partying. If you're with these friends who sit there and judge everybody that walks by and only talks about themselves and what's wrong with the world, or let's say they only talk about politics, or they only, you get where I'm going with this, and you kind of can be the witness from this space in the middle of the river with this space between you and that past version of you, and it can assist you in seeing what it is that you no longer wish to be a part of, or that you no longer wish to have in your reality. So it's not necessarily cutting it off entirely. Sometimes those experiences can be useful in guiding you in the direction to take. So not jumping into another group in your future that has a belief system rooted in perhaps something else that is too one-minded. So they're bringing me back to the compartmentalization. So we have these, we compartmentalize our emotions, and we say that this is caused by this, or the reason this is happening is X, Y, or Z. But we are not always seeing the bigger picture, the full aspect of all of the reasons that we are who we are. And so we base our reasons off of a limited exposure. So they're showing me that as a photograph, and if you have a photograph that's exposed longer or shorter, it changes your perspective of that photograph. So it's a limited exposure, so it's not the whole picture. It's not developed fully. So if you are, let's say, part of a group that is a hate group, that is a compartment. That is a compartmentalized box that those individuals' realities are in, and that is their construct. And if they are unable to unlock that barrier, then, or jump to the other side of the river and look back on it and see that it was a construct from a higher perspective. So when you're in the middle of this river, they're showing me that it's a different timeline, but it can also be a slightly higher dimension. So we'll go back into that a minute. If you look at the video, I drew a picture of 1, 2, 3 timelines. Let's take that into dimensions. So now you've got dimension number one, third dimension is, let's say, timeline 1, which is a very linear perspective. There are multiple timelines happening all at once. But then you're here on timeline 3, which is, let's say, a fifth dimensional. Now you're oscillating back and forth between these dimensions, or you're oscillating back and forth between these densities, or you're oscillating back and forth in between timelines, which we're always doing with the timelines. So the key is recognizing when you've wiffle-waffled. It's a really funny word that they just shared. Recognizing when you've wiffle-waffled back into old habit patterns, because you may decide I'm ready to move on from this particular group of individuals who I love dearly, but this is not a habit that I want to stay in. And then you find a new group of friends and you're excited and you get to know them, and then all of a sudden after a few times of hanging out, you realize that they're not talking about politics all the time, but they're talking about a particular person at work all the time or complaining about work all the time. It's the same thing in a different form. So we're being invited to recognize that from that kind of witness perspective and say, am I doing the same habit patterns in just a different form that just looks different, but in actuality really isn't very different. So we're being invited to recognize that right now and not get drawn back into those things. And also, I talked about in the last video, let go or be dragged, and letting go of those. So you might find yourself going, but I just found this new group of friends, or I just got this new job, or that doesn't mean that it's, that's the, again, being open. It's not the only aspect. So we're being invited to step outside of the confines of our expectations of the future, of our ideas about the past, and just be open, be in flow, be in our hearts, to breathe, and to allow ourselves to access more of ourselves and not so much more belief systems in which to wrap our brains around, because the brain is also changing. And so everything's evolving, essentially. That's what life is. It's change. It's evolution in essence of expansion, or in reference to expansion. So as certain memories come online, you will be guided to join certain potentials, whether that be in the form of social activities, places to visit, places to live, career choices. And again, we're being invited to follow the path of least resistance. So I want to clarify that briefly. They're showing me not to be confused with complacency, which I've talked about in another video, but sometimes so the path of least resistance isn't necessarily the easiest. So that's the difference. What they're showing me is it's easier to not make new friends. It's easier to stay at the same job. It's easier to stay in the old patterns, watch the same TV shows, read the same books, do what we're familiar with. However, that is resistance in one form. So that is resistance because, again, it's let go or be dragged. It's like we're dragging, hanging on with our nails, not wanting to change. And it's not necessarily all aspects. It could just be one thing that's anchoring us into this third dimensional density, or anchoring us into a timeline that really is ready to collapse, but we won't let it. It could be a relationship, right? It could be, I use friends, but it could be a spouse or a loved one, or it could be a family member that you just need to take a break from. with love and light, of course, non-judgment, always, not like, I can't stand you. I see people throwing temper tantrums. There's that aspect too where people are recognizing this, and they're like, I can't take your drama. And then they bring a bunch of drama to the table. That was one of my favorite things I used to say. Anybody that uses the word drama in a sentence or in a conversation more than a few times is probably bringing it in, because it's a word that draws it in. So we're being shown that people are out there that are realizing they're awake in some regards, but their heart isn't fully open, and so they're judging. Well, can you believe? So they're also kind of showing me we're being invited to be careful of that, to be full of care for those beings that are not necessarily 100% aware or online. So what those social groups where they talk about how asleep somebody else is, that's a judgment, and that is not a fifth dimensional supported energy. So being aware of teachers or friends or people that are judgy about, I use that word a lot, don't I? But I have my own that I work on as well. Releasing and recognizing is the most important. Ooh, I recognize that I just judged this aspect of myself or that person. So being that witness is what we're being invited to do. But if you're in with family and all they do is talk about how asleep everybody is, most likely that's not what's going on, but you know what I mean. It's a good thing to operate from your higher self and recognize that, and you can then break that cycle and not call people out on it from a perspective that is mean, but saying something like, I'm choosing not to talk negative about those people because they're doing the best they can, or I honor them wherever they're at in their path, because we all know we've been there. It's sometimes just flipping it a little bit so people go, oh, that's right, I was there once, So in love and light, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I know I didn't go into a lot of light language. This was an inflow message, and so energies are coming through. I'm getting this from my higher self, essentially. Anytime you listen to someone channeling their higher self or sharing a message of that frequency, it can be felt in the heart. Okay, I'm being guided to do a little light language based around judgment, heart frequency, which I've done a lot of, and then we're going to end on that note. Do ndarahande ek ea ukuno ukuno ho o henna at iniana. Do in hik ik anahak o ana ashte ek ik inahak oa. Uana ok uana anahak oa. Ur andar hastrao enak ia o kuno at enehe anak ian o kunoa. No nak ian oa o ku and het ian oa no kukuno et iana. Dore andra stastrak onnoton rendreste strandron dronde stendra hastror stra di endrat or et indrat istra hanara nakuanrana dorende istentrast estret indrast stastro korstit inisti andra hak orsti endri ististrat indrok or inderestistra et istrak endra dorondere endististrak indrast stastro or estri het inderestistra orstiner et ististini het indrak endere het indra Dorendi ististra strender hekitindri ististra hak orastra kurondro center hetindra stastra. Dorondi hestistre ki kini ekoko na akini ki stistra hat endra okuku kuno ku at ene hetina. Do kini et iana kukuno kini et iaru na kina akuru istra no na kina di ni ana o na usti ti na hetiana ut ustene. Nake uahini ki ach ene het istra or. And so it is. Dora andarasta strach it is the at indra strach or. Doros den der strach is den strach or. Doros de strach or. Dorot andarasta strach it or strach arstra or at inresta strach or. Doros strach inresta strach distana strach or. Just tapping on the heart. As I do this, it's bringing forth an energy for heart opening for others. Big, beautiful thunder in the background, lightning. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's beautiful. In love and light, guys. Namaste.